Hello, my LGBTQuties, and welcome back to another very special episode of A Jaded Gay. I'm Rob Lovelace, and here we are, part 2 of the Best of Guests So Far episode. So you know the drill, we're rapidly approaching the end of the year, thank God. And with that, it's really important to kind of look back, reflect, see what went well, what didn't go well, and kind of figure out what we want to achieve in the year ahead. And with listening to these previous episodes, I think that we might gain some new insight that we might have not gotten the first time around, because even for myself, re-listening to these clips as I put them in the episode, there were some tidbits that I pulled out that I'm like, that's something that kind of really resonates with me differently now than it did at the time of recording. So maybe it's just me, I don't know, but I hope that you enjoy it and you might get something a little different out of it this time around too. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'm excited to introduce our next guest. She is a writer, author, editor, and all-around creative. Please welcome my friend Sam McLean.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Can you tell us about your experiences of recognizing that you were bisexual?
Yes. Honestly, I was 14 when I should have kind of connected the dots. There was a moment where I woke up in the middle of the night. I was having this dream where I was kissing one of my best friends. And at the time, I was growing up in a pretty religious household, and that wasn't really something that we talked about. And I knew that it wasn't really accepted in my family. So I spent a long time convincing myself, I just dreamed that because, I think she's really cool and I want to be like her. I don't want to be with her. And I managed to convince myself of that for quite a long time. But that was the turning point. I was in 8th grade. I was 14 years old. I remember it very specifically because of how detailed that dream was and because of how strongly it made me feel.
What are some common misconceptions that people have about bisexuality that maybe either you've just heard as common misconceptions or that you've experienced firsthand?
I don't have much firsthand experience because so very few people actually know my sexuality. But from what I've heard, the most common is like, you just can't make up your mind, or you can't have a monogamous relationship because you're attracted to both men and women. And if you're with a man, you'll always be thinking about a woman and vice versa. And it's just not true. I mean, if you are straight and you are married to someone of the opposite sex and you see someone of the opposite sex who is attractive, you're still going to think, that person's attractive, but I love my partner. It's the same.
Yeah, definitely. And then in addition to, some of those misconceptions, is there anything that you view as unique obstacles that maybe you've encountered or that you just, that bisexual people have encountered that maybe someone who's gay or lesbian may not have to overcome?
Yeah, I think it falls back to pretty much the same as the misconceptions that you can't make up your mind. If someone says, I'm bisexual, a lot of people just assume, you're just confused. You'll figure it out eventually.
He is an actor, writer, and plant daddy, and recently launched his podcast, The Great Unbecoming. Please welcome Eric Feltus.
Thanks for having me, Rob. I'm happy to be here.
How did you, come to terms with your sexuality and learn to balance, your sexuality and your faith?
Yeah, I want to be very clear, y'all. My job as a coach is not to bring you to church. It's not to bring you out of church. It's not to bring you in the closet. It's not to bring you out of the closet. My job as a coach, and I think the same is for Rob as a podcaster, is to help you to love yourself deeply as you are in whatever vehicle that works for you. So I have had many people tell me many Christians tell me I can't be gay. I've had many gay people tell me I can't be a Christian. That's absolute asinine. This is what works for me, and it's a vehicle that I can use to help myself and to others love themselves and the world around them. I also want to say, when people say there's no one like, I can't tell you how many times people, Rob, tell me, there's no one like me. There are no other gay Christians. I'm like, hi, I'm here. And also, I'm one of the loud ones. Rob is here. He sits in the back, and that's okay. And that works for him, right? So there are many, many more quiet ones than there are loud ones, but there's many of us here. So I'm glad that you told us that. Thank you. There was a moment in my life where I was struggling with deconstruction, and it was after I started my business, actually. And I had a panic attack, and I had this thought of like, what if there is no afterlife, period? I had come to the conclusion that if there was a heaven and a hell, that I was going to heaven. I just knew that in my heart. And I had struggled with maybe there's not a hell, but I'm like, but there's something, right? So for the first time in my life, I was like, what if there's nothing? And that thought terrified me and sent me through this massive panic attack. And through the end of that, I remember sitting on the edge of the couch and I was sobbing, and I heard, I envisioned myself walking into the room. And this wasn't like a vision where like I could reach out and touch this person, like, but I sensed and I saw me. And I also knew at that moment that that version of me was Christ. That's not to say that I'm God, but that's also to say that I'm God. But it's also to say that you're God, that we're all God, that God is love. And in this moment, personified by an image of me was love. That's what it was. It was Christ. It was universal Christ. And this version of me said, Eric, thank you for never giving up on me. And I just broke down. I mean, I sobbed and I said, I would never give up on you. And to me, because of the way I was brought up, that was Christ and also a form of Jesus. Again, if I had been brought up Muslim, it probably wouldn't have been Jesus. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's not about the words, and images are very finite, but love is infinite, and love flows like water down to the deepest crevices imaginable. So I think that universe, God, love, whatever you want to call it, chose what I knew because of the stories that I knew. And that works for me, right? Does that make sense? So in that moment of thank you for never giving up on me, I think they were saying thank you for never giving up on Christianity, because I think that Christianity can be a source of love and can be a vehicle towards wholeness. And I think I can use that tool. I preach at the pulpit. I preach my own story of how my queerness is next to godliness. And while the church is a symbol for so much pain and trauma for so many people, and I hate that, I also know that we can transform it from within. And I also respect people walking away from it. But through that experience, I recognized that the more I love my queerness, the more I feel seen and loved by Christ.
You may have heard of 30 Flirty and Thriving, but have you ever heard of 40 Single Gay? Well, you're about to. Please welcome today's guest, Jonathan Lee. Hi, Jonathan. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Really good to be here, Rob.
So this is an autobiography of your 40th year, and just a week prior before you turned 40, your boyfriend broke up with you saying you were only 70% of what he wanted, and he said that to you while you were having sex?
Yeah. As you can imagine, that was a bit of a kind of head fuck. Yeah, approaching 40 is that kind of milestone in your life anyway. And I was with someone, we're only together 2 years, but I kind of thought he was the one. And despite some of the pitfalls in our relationship, I'd kind of come to terms with kind of what we had. And I thought that was it. So it was it really knocked me to hear that I wasn't enough for him, and that he wasn't happy. And you know, from there, I kind of started writing about that and reflecting on our past relationships to try and work out where it all went wrong. As well as then kind of the book then moves on to talk about the first of all, some of the cliched experiences I kind of went through, and I think what a lot of people go through when they break up in terms of trying to improve my image. There's also very much an obsessional bit around it, where I'd and I know you'll probably go on to ask me this in a minute, where I kind of create a fake profile to stalk him, so not my proudest moment, and then that me moving on from that in terms of actually going on the dating scene and some of those kind of hookups that I experienced, and some situations that I just kind of found myself in, all quite comical, and then actually kind of realizing what is the important thing is in life, and you know, and the fact that you don't need the love of another person to be able to love yourself.
And you closed out your book by saying that you found understanding through writing. So can you walk us through, what did you learn and how did you feel once you finished writing this book?
I think I learned a lot about myself. It was a lot happened during that kind of 40th year for me. The book starts with me waking up on my 40th birthday and finishes with me waking up on my 41st birthday, and just all of that kind of learning that's kind of taken place. What have I learned? I'm actually a people person. I'm a good friend, and actually that's what's important to me around kind of community and kind of forming those good kind of friendships with people. I talk about my relationship with my family, and I think I kind of moved on there. So I've never really felt part of my family. I've always kind of felt like the odd one out, and that my thinking is different to theirs. But we do go on a family holiday together where I revert back to being a kind of teenager with my sister. But I learned to love them and kind of accept the fact that we are very different, but that's okay. So there's learning across all aspects of my life, I guess.
Without any further ado, I'm really excited to bring our guest on for today. So he is the Director of Brand Marketing and Communications at Archer, this brand new gay dating app. He's been featured in a variety of media outlets like the New York Times, Forbes, NBC News, and CNN. And as a gay man himself, he knows firsthand the shame and secrecy that can accompany queer dating. So with all that said, I'm very excited to introduce Michael Kay. Hi, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Very excited to have you on and talk about Archer. Can you tell us a little bit about your personal experiences with dating as a gay man and the dating app culture?
Yes, absolutely. So I was actually closeted for well over 20 years. I didn't come out of the closet till after I graduated from college. So for me, gay dating apps were the first entry point for me to the LGBTQIA plus community. And this is back in 2014. And the gay dating apps that I had available that I turned to really reinforced this idea that queer love and queer connection should remain hidden. I was not comfortable yet with my own identity, but I was exploring gay dating apps. And when I opened them up, I saw a lot of blank profiles, black squares, torso photos. I didn't really see the people behind these names or usernames. And it made me feel as though even within my own community, I had to really remain hidden. And it forced me to turn to mainstream dating apps, which were predominantly used by straight people, but that is actually where I felt most comfortable. So I know we'll talk about this later, but that was a lot of the thought process behind Archer in how can we help change gay dating culture and create a dating app for today's daters, because a lot has changed in the past 10 years.
What would you say, and I'm sure it's hard to limit it to just one, but what would you say, in your opinion, is the biggest differentiator compared to the other gay dating apps? And why would you have gay men use Archer instead of another app? Like, what would you tell them to try it out for?
From a feature perspective, the biggest difference is going to be the profile photo selfie verification, making sure that everyone who comes to Archer and who you see is actually who they are. But I think the best part of it is that the way it's been built and the way the product has been designed, it truly is a make your own journey and a fit for no matter what type of relationship that you are looking for. So I think we did a really incredible job at making sure that if you're looking for something casual, if you're looking for hookups, that's totally okay with us. And we're giving you the tools to do so. Or if you're moving to a new city and you're just looking for friends and you want to find your community, that we're giving you the tools to do that as well. Or if you're in a rural city where there's not many LGBTQ plus people, that you can open Archer and find your chosen family. So I think the product team under Marcus Lofthouse, which is our chief product officer, did an incredible job at understanding the breadth and depth of who queer men are and who makes up that demographic of this community, and creating an app that truly does fit all their needs.
I'm very excited to introduce our next guest. He is a director, filmmaker, writer, and owner of Fitz Media, and he recently published his book, Recovering from Recovery. Please welcome Adam Fitzgerald. Hi, Adam. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Another thing that really jumped out to me in the book, you talked about the intrinsic connection between the rampant drug and alcohol abuse in the gay community and the deeply ingrained fear of intimacy. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, maleness in America is a very, excuse my language, but a very fucked up notion. And we grow up being told you shouldn't cry, you shouldn't need help, you shouldn't, those emotions are weak and stupid. You shouldn't, you should be strong, you should be a man, all of these things, and get maybe another book, but all of this is clearly rooted in misogyny and we are raised with the notion that to be like a woman, to be feminine is the worst possible thing you can do. And that as we're sort of coming into adulthood, we're raised just as men, gay men and straight men, to not have an emotional vocabulary, to not need to be held, to not need to be comforted, to not express sadness or pain or fear. And then we're expected to go into relationships and be intimate where we have no vocabulary, no skill set, no tools in being vulnerable. So I think just American men in general, we are discouraged from learning the things we need to learn to be intimate. Then you add being gay on top of that, with the world telling you you're wrong, telling you you're disgusting. And that, as you said, like the spaces where you can go, where we could go and find intimacy are bars. And so you put all of these things together. I don't have a vocabulary or skill set in how to be vulnerable and intimate. I'm terrified that what I'm doing is shameful and wrong. And I desperately want to be intimate. I want to connect with another human being. I want to be close. I want to be touched. I want to have sex. I want to do all these things, but I don't know how, and I'm ashamed that I want it. So you start slamming vodka, you start doing drugs. And I think so many of us needed to engage in substances in order to be intimate. But the problem is when you engage in these activities, when you are messed up and high or drunk, you're not present and you're not fully there. And so you don't, it's this sort of catch-22 of you desperately want to be intimate and connected and close to another person, but you have to take a substance that erases part of you and doesn't allow you to fully be present and there with them. And I think there's, it snowballs. It can spiral very easily to this connection of, well, I want to have sex. I want to meet people. I want to go out. I want to do these things. I want to be intimate or sexual, whatever it is. And we reach for the bottle. We reach for the drugs, and they become connected and intertwined. And I get it. I did it. I think it can be so scary as a man to want to be held and to have sex and to enjoy the body of another person and to be open and there and intimate and tender and sexual and whatever it is. It's so scary that we reach for something, I think, to help us get over that fear and to get over the fact that we didn't learn how to be intimate and vulnerable.
And with that, I'm excited to introduce our next guest. He is a lawyer and author of Sunday Dinners, Moonshine and Men. Please welcome Tate Barkley. How are you today, Tate?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks for joining us. Going on through the book, you document about how later in life, or later in your academic career, so more through college and law school, is when you began drinking more, and how you thought repressing your sexual orientation was causing the drinking. So tell us a little bit more about that.
I think when I was in high school, by the time my junior or senior year, I probably drank just about every weekend, but I wasn't a daily drinker by any means. And I had discovered by that time that when I drank, I just felt better about being me. I mean, just straight up, I just felt better. It gave me instant relief from, the repression I was putting myself under in the world around me. I felt like, I was Superman. Give me a good beer buzz and I was Superman. And as I got older, this conflict of being attracted to guys and trying to repress it and live as a straight guy, it was getting harder and harder and getting more and more difficult. And, when I got to University of Texas at Austin, and it was really tough, but I managed. And when I got to law school, I was so busy. I was working and going to law school at the same time, but still it was there. And I think that I went into what I look upon as alcoholic drinking probably my first year of law school. And for me, alcoholic drinking, my definition of it, for me was whenever I literally had to drink every day to cope. It was clear to me that drinking was not a way to have fun. It was a way that I was coping. And I think I crossed that line my first year of law school. Fortunately, I managed to finish law school and pass the bar exam, that allows you to be an attorney, at least here in Texas. And eventually went on to open my own law practice. The drinking, if I got drunk, I just didn't have to deal with the real me. And I had lost so many friendships. By this point in time, a lot of my friends had pushed me away or ended their friendships because my drinking had gotten to the point to where I was just loud and obnoxious all the time. And if you've ever been around an alcoholic, I can tell you this, that you go into, they can be very self-absorbed sometimes, as I was at the time, no doubt about it, when I drank. And I equated, once I reached the point to where I decided that I needed to come out, and I started very gingerly coming out to people, my friends. I remember with one of my dearest friends from high school, she had stopped wanting to hang out with me because she just couldn't handle me I was drunk all the time. And I remember sitting with her when I came out to her, and I told her, I said, look, I hope this helps. I'm convinced that the reason I was drinking so much is because I was wrestling with being gay. And now that I'm coming out and I'm being honest about who I am, I just know this drinking thing's going to take care of itself. And I was convinced of that. I mean, Rob, I was convinced that, okay, coming out's going to cure my alcoholism. It didn't work out that way. Because drinking then made it a lot easier for me I was still very uncomfortable around gay people. I mean, I was willing to tell you I was gay, Rob, but I didn't want to be around gays because, well, they're gays. And, I had spent my lifetime, gays were those people. And now that I was one, or was willing to admit that I was one, I still had almost this inherent bias against my own people. So obviously drinking made it a lot easier to go into the gay bars. So drinking played a role not only in the repression of it, but just in the reason I said earlier, I think that I didn't come clean and honest to myself about being gay until I got sober is because I did not have sex with a guy sober. I did with Rob back when I was 16. But once I came out, I was drunk every time. I was drunk, I was stoned, or I was something. Because I felt I needed to be, because I still had this inherent discomfort about this, being with another man. And so then alcohol became, the only way I could really interact with my own people. because I still was holding all the shame.
I am very excited to welcome our next guest. He is a licensed clinical social worker, a podcast host, and an author. Please welcome Seth Showalter. Hi, Seth. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing well, thank you. Thanks for coming on the show today. I'm very excited to have you. Are you still religious today? And if so, how do you balance your faith and your sexuality?
That's a great question. And I wish I had a wonderful, clear-cut answer on that, but I don't. All I can tell you is I am deconstructing, and I do not hold to a lot of the same beliefs. So I would still call myself a Christian, quote unquote. Well, no, I take that back. I don't know. I don't call myself a Christian. I call myself a Christ follower, but I am not a Christian in that I do not adhere to the church. So let me be very, very clear. I follow Christ. I do not follow the church. Big difference. But not only that, like I've deconstructed things around like the Bible. I've deconstructed things around hell. I've deconstructed things around my understanding of sin. I've deconstructed things around my understanding of shame and guilt and what God really thinks about where we stand in regards to that. So I've deconstructed a lot, but I still would call myself a Christ follower.
And you end the book with a statement to the church saying that the reason why conversion therapy wasn't successful was because there wasn't a problem to fix in the first place. So tell us more about that.
Yeah. So, because I know in my heart of hearts that I'm perfectly acceptable for who I am. And like I mentioned before, this has been a long process. I mean, it took me years to eventually come out officially and be okay in my own skin. Like, I don't think I came out of the closet. Well, actually, I didn't come out of the closet officially, like on Facebook and all of that jazz, until the day gay marriage was confirmed and made legal in the United States in 2015. But like, even after doing that, I still fought for years around self-hatred. And if I'm honest, I still struggle given some of that closeness to Christianity. It's still a struggle with me. But what I do know at the end of this story is that if a God exists, he would much rather I be alive than no longer here. And that God, if he does exist, cares about our future and cares about our happiness, and he does not want us to suffer. And primarily what the LGBTQIA community has been doing for the longest time is we've been suffering. We have been suffering under the hands of a tyrannical religion that has been hurting so many of us for so long. And what we need to recognize and what we need to acknowledge is that we are accepted and we are loved exactly for who we are.
I am very excited to introduce our next guest. He is the host of Scream Queer podcast. Please welcome Ralph Anthony. Hi, Ralph.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm very excited to have you on for our Halloween special episode. Who are some of your favorite queer horror characters, and why do you consider them to be queer?
I mean, I'm going to have to go with my favorite franchise. First of all, I just want to commend, I believe they're called Radio Silence, the team who's responsible for the 2 recent Scream films, just for like inclusion of like all types of orientations and genders and just like queer representation. My favorite character from the new franchise is Mindy, who is portrayed by Jasmine Savoy Brown, who is amazing. She's amazing. I love how I believe she identifies as a lesbian in the film, but I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But no, I love how they made this like strong and like quick on their feet, sassy character. And I mean, she's not like a damsel in distress. Like she is literally like the comedic relief, and like she's so funny, and she doesn't die, which is great. Spoiler alert. And yeah, I think like as a queer person, like that's the kind of representation that I would love to see more of in like mainstream film, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And to your point, she's, the comedic relief, but also like can take a hit. Like, I mean, I think it was on the subway, she was like stabbed, and then she's sitting in the subway station, like they're like, oh, are you okay? And she's just like, oh, go get him. Like, she's not like waiting around for people to like take care of her. She's like, get him. Like,
and then at the very end, she's like running around like, who's the killer? Who's the killer? I'm like, girl, you just got stabbed. Like, why are you running?
Exactly.
But no, yeah, that's like just like a strong character. She was awesome.
Definitely. And then regarding queerness, whether we're talking about characters or storylines, you kind of touched upon this already with the inclusivity, but what would you like to see more of in horror movies?
I need to see a queer final girl, final boy, final day, just and like the main character. I don't like the side characters are great, but I think it's time. Like I'm ready to see like a queer like front runner. Like I want to see them be the main character. I want them to be the Sidney Prescott of their own franchise. Like that would just be so cool. Like, and I think we're in a time right now where like we're fighting for like so much, and I think that would be kind of important just to include that. And I don't want to like straight to DVD film. I want like these big companies need to get together and put it out in theaters and back it like they do everything else. But I mean, I'm a very hopeful person. So just fingers crossed that like something like that were to happen, because that would just be so awesome.
Like Love, Simon blockbuster size, but obviously horror.
Yes, horror version though. Yeah, like fighting and like bloody, and just seeing someone's like journey. Because that's another thing I like about horror is some of these horror films, like they showcase like someone's trauma and how it affects them throughout their life, like how these like scary events like take over their lives, and it affects their mental health. And like I think that's also why I like the horror genre, if that sounds kind of crazy, but I know it's just it's really cool to see someone who goes from being a victim to a fighter.
All right, so that concludes our Best of Guests So Far episodes, part 1 and 2. Like I said, I hope you enjoyed this, got something new out of it that you didn't get the first time around. And I hope you all have a great holiday season. And as we go into that, please remember, if you can rate, review, subscribe, share the show with your friends. Really, it helps get the word out there so that we can reach a bigger audience, hopefully get more guests on in the future in 2024, so we could have even more voices empowered and have more queer experiences shared. I'd really love to do that. Any feedback or questions, feel free to reach out to me, rob@ajadagay.com. You can follow the podcast on Instagram, TikTok, SoundCloud, and YouTube @ajadagaypod. You can follow me personally, Rob Loveless, on Instagram @Rob_Loveless. You know the drill. We've got merch, we've got the website, we've got Patreon. I said it 1,000 times before, you know what to do. So please, any support you can give, I greatly appreciate it. But like I said, ultimately, I hope you have a happy holiday season, whether you're with your biological family or your family of choice. Just whatever you celebrate, whatever you believe in, I just hope it's a very relaxing, peaceful time where you can really feel the love around you. And I hope that you're all recharging and ready for a new year of new growth, new challenges, and new opportunities. So I will see you all in 2024. And until then, remember, every day is all we have, so you got to make your own happiness. Bye.